Yo, what's up Serpa Squad? Tanner here, and I'm back with something a little different. This wasn't the video I had planned for this week, but it's something I thought of a while ago. I knew it wouldn't take long, and in a pinch I made it for this week's video. Regardless, I think it's pretty neat. Let's get to work. This project will be made with this glass bowl, which is about 14 inches in diameter. I also have a 1-inch uni seal. I'll drill through the container with a diamond tip tool saw to account for the uni seal. In addition to that, I have Duct seal putty, cut resistant gloves, and safety glasses. I turned the container over and made a ring of putty on the underside. I also put tape on the inside to keep the hole cleaner once the drill goes through. Water was poured into the reservoir and I got to drilling. The water will keep the bit from overheating and potentially cracking the glass. This took way longer than expected because the glass is pretty thick. I wiped away the residue and got a piece of 150 grit sandpaper to buff the opening. I put water on the sandpaper and got to work. The water will eliminate dust particles. After a quick sanding, I gave it a good rinse. Here's a look at the modified container. Now let's get the rest of the mechanics out of the way. To start, I have a 1-inch thick PEX pipe. I measured the inside of the container to get a rough idea of where the water line should be. I marked the pipe with this measurement and cut it down with a ratcheting pipe cutter. The uni seal was put into the new opening along with the pipe. At this point I realized the pipe was way too long and I cut it shorter. Before getting too far into the project, I checked to make sure the setup holds water. Everything was working perfectly. For the base of this setup, I have a ceramic bowl that's 10 inches in diameter. I also have a small pump, a 1/2 inch thick PEX pipe with a smaller pipe on one end that fits into the pump, and a CPVC cap. I carved this down so it fits inside the larger pipe from earlier. The way this works is that the 1/2 inch thick pipe is attached to the pump, which sits on the bottom of the bowl. The glass container then rests on top of the bowl with a smaller pipe going through the other. However, once I put the pieces together, I realized that the thicker pipe was way too long, so I cut it shorter. I also marked for a new height on the inside tube and cut it down. Here's when the cap comes into play. I drilled a series of holes along the top and attached it to the pipe. Then the pump was placed in the bowl and the glass container was slid over the pipe. At this point it could be filled with water for a test run. It worked well, but I wanted to make a few modifications. First, I drilled more holes in the cap for better water distribution. I put it back on the pump and I liked what I saw. I also realized that the overflow wouldn't work. It would be really difficult to escape and service this setup as is. So I measured the current water level and the height of the other tube. With these measurements, I cut out a new 1-inch thick pipe. This will wrap around the other pipe completely, which will make maintenance much easier. I marked for the water line but went slightly lower than before. I also used a step bit to drill 4 holes in the pipe. They're drilled in pairs on either side of the pipe. I used a saw to cut between the holes to create a slit. The process was repeated on the other side. Now we have the same effect as before, but the overflow pipe completely covers the return. What's happening here is the pump is filling the glass container through the small pipe, while the slit in the larger pipe acts as an overflow. In other words, the water is continuously circulated through the system. Before moving on, I cut the slit slightly larger to make the overflow more effective. An issue with the current setup is that the glass container rests on top of the pump's cord, which isn't ideal. I got a file and made a notch in the side of the bowl to account for the cord. Now everything nests together cleaner and the cord isn't being pinched. Now onto the scaping materials. For this one I'm using Cereus stone, Manzanita Twigs, and Carib Sea Supernatural's Torpedo Beach Sand. I started by putting sand in the bottom of the container to give the stones a foundation to rest in. As usual, I used a fan brush to distribute it throughout. Then I could get to scaping. My goal was to build a structure of stones around the pipes in the center of the container. This is why having the longer overflow pipe was really important. I can take the glass container off of the bowl without the scape falling apart. Anyway, I tried several different arrangements until I came up with something I like. It's quite simple but will work perfectly for this setup. After that, I added more sand like before. I'll address the cracks between the stones with Poly-Fil polyester fluff. I pushed small segments between the cracks, making sure not to completely cover the slit for the overflow or the return holes. After that, I added the Manzanita Twigs atop the stones. I like the scape, but I need to make sure it will work with water. I went and filled the container. It didn't flow too well, so I adjusted the polyester. For plants, I'm keeping it simple with some Riccia fluitons, Anubias Petite, and Ficus pumila quercifolia. I started by putting some Riccia atop the hardscape. However, I didn't like how it affected the water flow. I decided to drill another hole through the top of the cap for better distribution. I put a few stones on top of the pipe and planted the Riccia throughout the cracks. It took a while to get it looking proper because every minor adjustment drastically alters the flow of water. Once I did, I added the twigs back to the scape. Now for the remaining plants. First up was the Anubias. I put a few segments near the top of the formation. The vines of ficus were attached to the side of the largest stone to complete the scape. And there you have it, the DIY fountain bowl. At this point I still think it's somewhat of a prototype, but I like how it turned out. I tried to keep the design simple and elegant to reflect the nature of the container. I think something like this is better served with fewer elements. Initially I wanted to add some floating plants, but I thought they would clutter the design. I think this would be an awesome centerpiece for a coffee table or something of that nature. I want to know what you think though, let me know down in the comments. I think this was a neat little project that was pretty cheap and easy to make. Aside from the tools needed to drill the glass, this is something that could easily be replicated. Because there are very few components, it's also really easy to maintain, modify, or rescape. Anyway, that's all I have for you in this one. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this project and learned something new. If you did, be sure to leave the video with a thumbs up if you want to help support my content. Until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.